Well, it's great to be here at EcoMotion. I'm Carla Bailo. I'm the president and CEO of the Center for Automotive Research. We're a nonprofit automotive think tank, and our mission is to promote the sustainability of the automotive and mobility industry. So everyone in our panel is going to introduce themselves, so I'll turn the microphone over to Mikael.
Hi, I'm Mikael Ronnholm. I'm the head of innovation strategy and collaboration at CEVT, and CEVT is the R&D center of the Geely Auto Group.
Welcome, and how about John?
Hi, everybody. My name is John Absmeier. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Lear. Lear is a global automotive technology supplier that plays in the seating and electronics business, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And Dragos.
Hi, I'm Dragos Maciuca. I'm the Executive Technical Director for Ford Research and Innovation Center in Palo Alto. Basically, I run the office in Palo Alto where we look for technologies from Silicon Valley to bring into the automotive space.
Well, thank you all for joining. We have so much to talk about in such little time with the impact that COVID-19 has had on our industry, on how we do our day-to-day business, and what its future is going to do in terms of our products and our future developments, future mobility solutions. So let's get right into it. A lot of the automakers are going to start production next week, full force. Of course, it's going to take a while to ramp up to 100%, if indeed we'll be able to get back to 100% again. And several OEMs and suppliers have written playbooks about how to restart the manufacturing lines. And John, I'm going to put this question to you, and then of course Ford can chime in as well, Dragos. But John, one of the first playbooks I read came from Lear, 56-page playbook in my memory, which took some time to wade through. But tell us, what are the key points? What are those key health and safety measures that need to be put in place before manufacturing can begin again?
Yeah, so we released the Safe Work Playbook several weeks ago. It's now gone through a second revision. It's actually more than 80 pages now, but it includes both engineering and administrative sites, as well as operations and manufacturing sites. And what we tried to do was share our best practices and our plans for how to both make employees feel safe when they come back to work, but also for it to actually be safe. So the playbook has a series of outlines and checklists on how to do certain things like disinfection, what types of personal protective equipment or PPE should be deployed in different scenarios, and generally just how to keep the workplace safe. As of now, the book's been downloaded over 23,000 times, and it's gotten a lot of attention from both industry peers, competitors, as well as customers, and even regulators in the public sector as well. So it's been well received, and our intention really was that this is going to take a village. This is not something that any individual company or any individual is going to solve. So we thought it would be better that we sort of open source that playbook and make it available to the industry and anybody that wanted to use it. So it's been working out well, because we also get feedback through that, and are able to even include or incorporate improvements to it as we go.
Thanks, John. And I think we have to give kudos in general to the automakers that have really stepped up for the arsenal of health and for really leading the different ways that we can return back to work safely. Dragos, what about Ford, and not just the manufacturing line, but I've heard also that they're not going to bring back the salaried workforce for what could be months, maybe even later in the summer. So are the same kinds of precautions happening on the salary side as well?
Yeah, so a couple of points to add on top of what John said first, and then to continue with your question. So first of all, I absolutely agree that we're all in this together. So it really takes a village. We all need to do our part, and it's not an individual responsibility. It takes every single person to get this thing right. And yes, we have a large playbook also, and manufacturing. In particular, there's been some interesting innovations that we've done in terms of proximity and warning workers if they get too close to each other. So we were able to track that. On the salary side, same thing. We have a playbook on how to distance ourselves, how to even eat and clean desks and check people at the entrance. But yes, we fully expect to come in different waves, and it could be months before everyone comes back in. And it also depends on the local regulations. Again, we are in California, where we have to first play by the rules of the county we're in, and then based on what Ford does at the global scale. So you need to take into it. That's what makes these things really difficult, particularly for a multinational, is that you need to take into account how you do it globally, so that there are not too many differences within the company, but also you need to respect the local laws and rules. So it certainly makes it interesting, to say the least. But the bottom line is, you have to use common sense. We're using common sense to protect people and to make them feel safe and play our part. And yeah, in terms of playing our part, it's not just how we protect ourselves and our workforce, but yes, all the work that Ford has done in helping helping the entire healthcare system by providing PPEs from scratch. It wasn't something that was on our roadmap ever, and we had to get it on our roadmap in a few days, in a few weeks. And what I loved about it was the innovation that came with it. How people got really creative in figuring out how to reuse materials and how to reuse subsystems that we normally use in cars to actually use them for ventilators. How we collaborated. John and I talked quite a bit about exactly this kind of distancing warning and what systems to use, and there's really a lot of sharing, and you can see how the whole industry kind of came together to play an important role in trying to get us back to some level of normalcy.
So Dragos, do you have the watch on that tells you when you're 6 feet from other people? That's a Ford thing.
I don't. I don't work on the assembly line, so we kind of guesstimate the 6 feet.
And Mikael, Sweden never shut down. And you might be kind of, teaching us all the right way to do things. But have you also had to implement certain health and safety measures, even though you've never really closed shop?
Obviously, we have been impacted by the corona situation, but luckily for us, we have not shut down. We adjust. So we continue doing what we did before, just try to find new ways. We have been very heavily focusing on digitalization of the work we do. We are working from home, most of us, and we are now looking into how we successfully will move back into office, but then we take into consideration the social distancing. We try to keep the distance even in office and reduce the number of people at the office at the same time, etc. But on a general term, we do what we did before the corona. We just do it differently.
Great. And one of the things I've been happy to be doing while working remotely is learning a lot. And I've been really compelled by a lot of the stylists in the automotive world that are saying that their team is more productive and more creative than ever being out of the office. So we're starting to see some pluses along with, some of the, we'll call them inconveniences of COVID-19. But what about the future? What about all those things that we were investing in as the automotive industry prior to COVID? Mobility services, electrification, connected, autonomous. Will that continue? Will it slow down? I guess maybe we'll put John first on that, and everyone pipe up as you wish.
Yeah, I can give a little overview. It's something that I've been focused on specifically. If you look at it from an industry perspective, it dependent on how long and deep this down cycle goes, we'll see consolidation happening. There's already some happening, both with small companies and large companies, and in between. But the automotive industry in general is a very capital intensive business. And liquidity becomes challenging when we're not producing cars and generating revenue. So, so generally speaking, we're seeing across the value chain that there's potential for consolidation. And I also think because capital is less available for smaller tech companies, there's also chance for consolidation in the startup world. I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually think that's a good thing. It creates some focus and also prioritizes what are the technologies and the areas that can have an impact near term. So if you start to talk about the trends in technology, autonomy, connectivity, electrification, and shared mobility is how I'll categorize them. We've seen for the last 12, maybe 18 months that autonomy at the high levels, level 4 and level 5, continue to push out a little bit. Commitments on when those are going to be available broadly, it takes a long time, and that's because it's extremely hard. We still have challenges with sensors. We still have challenges with computing. We still have challenges with regulatory and liability frameworks. So autonomy has somewhat had a bit of a refocus towards the level 3 and below, where ADAS and safety are the primary purpose, with the caveat that delivery and maybe last mile types of technologies could have more investment, because now we're all working from home, and we're getting food delivered, and we're getting groceries delivered, and whatnot. So those types of technologies could have an increase in investment. If I click down through connectivity, I think connectivity has been on a path towards ubiquity in the automotive space for the past decade. And now more than ever, I believe that the industry is looking for value, capturing value that maybe was not recognized before from connectivity. So in particular, one that I'll highlight is contactless transactions. How can we buy our fuel, buy our groceries, buy food, etc., without having to get out of the car and swipe a credit card and interact with a human? So for example, one of the things we're working on with our Zevo division is exactly that. We actually won a PACE award for that last week, the Zevo Market. And that enables you to do those transactions from the dashboard very, very easily without having to interact with any infrastructure except for grabbing the pump and putting it in the gas tank. Similar with food and coffee and so on. So those are technologies and connectivity that I think bring value in a time when that's highly valued. If we can use and leverage the technologies that are either in cars today in the connected fleet that's out there, or that are coming in new cars, creating that value for the businesses, both the car makers and the supply chain, as well as the consumer, will be much more welcomed and I think adopted at a higher rate as a result of COVID-19. Electrification, it's sort of regional. China has doubled down. They're reducing limitations on emissions, or I should say they're extending the time frame for their Euro 6 implementation. They've opened up the number of license plates that they'll issue, or registrations that they'll issue. They've extended subsidies for electric vehicles, so on and so forth. And so they're also investing significantly in infrastructure. So in some sense, China is full speed ahead and then some. Europe, it's a little bit gray. It's being driven by the carbon dioxide emissions regulations that are pending. And however, I would say that Europe seems to be on track and full speed ahead towards electrification. And then in the U.S., it's a little bit of a different story, because fuel and oil is so low that the return on investment or the value prop for an electric car is possibly not there for the consumer. But on the flip side of that, with all the stay-home orders, people are recognizing that air quality has improved significantly in some major urban areas, and that's a nice change. And so people recognize that without all the cars running around, maybe we can have cleaner air. All the IC engine cars, I should say. And then finally, shared mobility. There's two schools of thought. I think both have validity. One school of thought is that people aren't going to use shared mobility. They're going to opt for personally owned cars where they can control the cleanliness and the hygiene of their own space. which I think is true if you can afford it. So in China, even for example, we're seeing that volumes of new cars are increasing back to sort of somewhat normal levels, probably because people want their own car in their own space, similar with traffic. The counter argument is that people who are normally using buses and subways might move up the stack into shared mobility when they can get in a car with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 other people, as opposed to a bus with 25 or 50 other people. So I look at it sort of regionally, but also as consumers are a bit moving up the stack in order to control their own space.
Great points. And I want to shift to Mikael, because you talked a little bit about Europe and electrification. I just saw maybe 2 days ago that the sales percentage of EVs in Europe grew greatly this past month. So what's the thought process in Europe, Mikael?
I think we are closely monitoring what is going on in different parts of the world, and I agree with John on most of what he says. Electrification will be stable in Europe. So from an investment point of view, I think that the strategy that we have, and probably most OEMs have for electrification for European market, will remain stable.
And how about connected, autonomous? Will that work still continue at the same pace, or do you see any slowing?
I think that if you look at how the market is, because right now there is so many uncertainties in the market, and I think that what concerns us and probably most OEMs is how long those uncertainties will remain. If you look at autonomous driving, obviously that is a very high expensive technology. Right now, I think that the demand and need for autonomous technologies will decrease. Short term, probably will pick up again. We can see that public transportation has been decreasing significantly in the closed down cities, up to 90% in some of them. Ride hailing, ride sharing goes the same way, down 60% in many markets. And those are short-term effects, and that probably will have an effect on ride-sharing technologies. I think that connectivity, and especially the software services, and especially the one focusing on health, will be very, very high importance in the upcoming 2-3 years, depending on how long the effect of the COVID will remain in the mindset of people. I think that when we find, and if we find, which I do believe we do, technologies for disinfection of surfaces in vehicles, but also cleaning air in the cabins, that will help to pick up ride sharing. We see now that people who has vehicles, they continue and increase the use of the private vehicles. We can see that people that has previously been doing a lot of travel with public transportation, buses, trams, etc. They prefer bikes or walk today. Micromobility will probably pick up. So, but again, I think that the consequences, the effect will be very dependent on how long the uncertainty will remain.
Yeah, that's very similar to what our center is studying as well. Is there's a certain amount of short-term impact, but if we have a reoccurrence in the fall again, and or if there's more that comes, we have another pandemic shortly following this one, the ramifications go much deeper, and I think people's expectations and thoughts will begin to shift drastically. Dragos, what are you telling the startups out in the Valley? You're surrounded by startups. First of all, they're going to survive. And, John alluded to maybe some of them joining forces to ensure survival. And, are any of them thinking to morph their business plans based on what's happening today, and or change them completely?
Yeah, so first of all, the Valley normally goes through these cycles of explosion, of boom, and then there's some sort of event where I kind of liken it to a forest fire where you kind of need to get rid of all the dead wood. And, you know, when we have 80 LiDAR companies or maybe even more, it just doesn't make sense. You can't have them all. So at some point in time, the weaker ones need to go away. And this is one of these forcing functions where only the stronger ones are going to survive. The ones where the entrepreneurs are really solid and they know what they're doing, where the business model is solid, where they really are in for the long term. And you know, if you step back and you look statistically over the years, it's exactly during events like this is that some of the best companies have been formed. Some of the biggest names in the valley were actually formed or at least survived through events like this. So I fully expect that out of the 80 LiDAR companies, by the end of this, we're going to have at most 40, and even that is probably optimistic. So yes, we're already seeing some of them. First of all, cash even from the VCs is starting to dry up. In some areas, though, it's still there. So a lot of them are scrambling to get cash. Others are looking for this dual opportunity to either be sold or raise cash. Most likely the next 3 months are going to be really tough. But again, while tough at an individual level, I think for the valley, it's actually a good thing because it's just part of the normal cycle that we go through. Yes, some will try to partner with others. In the end, I fully expect that by the end of this, we'll have a lot fewer startups in the space, but there will be the strong ones. So in a way, it will be almost easier to partner with those that are left. I've seen few of them pivot, like particularly if they have technology that can be used for image processing. That there's one, for example, that is now using their image processing to gently warn people walking into public areas to wear their face mask if they don't have it. Others that try to identify you even with the face mask on. We don't have issues now with Apple Pay, right? If you have the face mask on. So there are certainly all these things that are happening. In terms of all the other areas, I agree with John and Mikael. Cleanliness, for example, has always been on our radar screen for shared vehicles. Now it's top of mind. You're looking at new materials, looking at how you can embed nano copper, nano silver, things in how you can make materials that are much easier to clean. Another issue right now, obviously, depending on what cleaning agents you use, you have to worry about not damaging the material. So maybe in the future, we're looking for materials that are much more resistant to these cleaning products. In terms of micromobility, we're actually seeing a bit the opposite. I guess people don't want to touch the same handlebars as everyone else. So we're actually seeing them stay away from them for the time being. But again, we're looking at different materials for the handlebars, different microstructures, and seeing how you can adjust those. In terms of autonomy, I agree. The last mile delivery, like even in my neighborhood, I'm seeing a lot more bots delivering. In the beginning, people would stop and look at them and they were cute and all that. Now it's becoming almost part of the norm around here. So definitely there's that change in the space. So clearly there'll be some very short-term reactions that we don't know how long they'll last. But I think this event is going to be traumatic enough that it will have long-term impact in how we do our business and how it's going to affect other businesses. Yeah, in terms of, no touch. I love to shop at the farmer's market. And until now, it's been one of the last places where you have to still show up with a wad of cash. This past weekend, it was all Apple Pay. I did not pull out my wallet. And, it felt great. But as I was saying earlier too, at the same time, everything is wrapped in plastic now. So we're trying to get away from plastic for environmental reasons. Now we have plastic everywhere. So yes, we're saving the air by not driving, but we're dumping more plastic in. So again, those are going to be short-term events, but it will be interesting to see which ones are going to be the long-term impacts that's going to have on the rest of us.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the dichotomy. I know my grocery store advises everyone to shop and scan, which I love to do, but the shop and scan devices at the end were situated such that they can only keep one open now. because they're too close together. So if you use it, then sometimes there's a longer line than just going in the regular line. So everything is interesting. And my Fitbit now, I can pay with this latest Fitbit I just got. So if I'm jogging, I don't even need my phone anymore. So everything is getting, really, really ramping up in terms of contactlessness and being able to manage and pay for things.
Yeah.
What about cyber? I don't know about you, but personally, I get so much spam anymore, so many potential phishing. It's been coming from LinkedIn. It's been coming into my work mail, into my home mail. What does that mean for the autos? And is there more that we need to do to keep the products and keep our customers safe, and even our companies for that matter? Any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can opine on that. I do think that cyber becomes ever more important as cars get connected. That it's just natural effect of opening up these attack surfaces more broadly. I think the challenge with cyber in auto is that the majority of cars out on the road today, they're still based on antiquated networks like CAN bus, which are inherently insecure, but require you to lay hands on them, right, to make any impact. So I always say, is it easier to hack that car or maybe just cut the brake line? So those, I think today there's still it's still a pending issue. The way the vehicle network is set up, there's not as much of a threat or a risk to have a massive impact. But as we go forward, it becomes increasingly important. I don't think that COVID necessarily changed that. I just think that now that everybody is working from home and might have more time on their hands, we're seeing more fishy behavior, if you will. So I do think, though, it's a critical element of connectivity and the car of the future. Absolutely.
No, I said maybe we got lucky. I'm not seeing quite as many fishing expeditions, but yeah, I mean, cybersecurity has definitely been at top of our head when you're talking about connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles. But I think from a workforce perspective, the fact that we are all working from home, to some extent, it's proven that the internet as it was designed, it actually survived this shock. I mean, it's been an absolute shock, right, to change everyone almost overnight from working in offices to working from home. And you can see that there is obviously that increases the number of attack surfaces, not just vehicles, right? But now every single computer at home becomes yet another attack surface rather than individual offices. But you also see rethinking not only at the industry level of how much real estate they actually need, but you start seeing the local governments like Santa Clara County here. It's when they see that everyone is actually working from home and things haven't come to a halt and traffic is reduced, they're already starting to ask all the companies like, well, can you guys do this on a permanent basis or a much more extended basis, so that you don't have the traffic, so that you don't have all these other. So it's going to become, I think, a very interesting story in terms of real estate, also commercial real estate.
I would like also to comment on cybersecurity, because I see a very strong increase on service development, and when we start to move into both personal and individualized services, and we put more and more of those services in the cloud, I think that the cyber threat will become increasingly important to handle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much for all your comments. I've been given the time to close. So really nice to see all of you and great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.